My name's Bob Darrell, and I am alcoholic. And only through the grace of a God that I was afraid to trust, that I've accessed by the program of self-reduction of the 12 steps as outlined in the book, an ability to remain sponsorable, and a persistent and consistent commitment to the primary purpose of self-abandonment and service. I haven't had a drink or any mind or emotion-altering substance since October 31st, 1978. And that is unbelievable for me. And probably more important than a little over 33 years of abstinence is I found something here that was inconceivable to me. I found freedom. Freedom from what? From drinking? No. You want freedom from drinking? Punch a cop. You're going to get that for a little while. The freedom from the thing that would always just get on me and drive me so insane that eventually I'm going back to drinking, or I'm taking some pills or seeing a doctor or doing something because I'd be so locked up in me. And I'm a free man today. And that's amazing. And I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I owe AA big time. So when it asks me to do something, no matter how inconvenient, no matter whatever, yes. My life is not my own. I lost my life. I threw it away. And Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life that's beyond anything I've ever had, but it is not mine. I want to welcome anybody that's new. I'm real glad you're here. I may be more glad you're here than you are. But I've been around here not a long time. There's a lot of people in this room sober a lot longer than I am. But I've been around here long enough to know what can happen to you. You don't know what can happen to you. If we told you what could happen to you, you'd think we're screwing with you. Stuff can happen to you here beyond your imagination. It's amazing. When I got sober, I think step 5 was the first thing in AA that I was ever confronted with that sort of felt kind of yucky to me. I didn't really want to do it, and I probably wouldn't have done the first one if it hadn't have been for something that was going on. You know how maybe somebody had this experience where it'll drive you to do a 4th and 5th step, and it's all of a sudden every meeting you go to, that's the subject. I mean, what's that about? I mean, it's like, and I just got tired of it. I just got tired of saying, well, I've never done that, and I just feeling like the leper in Alcoholics Anonymous, and so I did my first one, and I got to tell you, nothing much changed. I did what a lot of people do. I wrote the 40 pages of everything I was ashamed of and all my deep, dark secrets. And I'll tell you, I was honest, but nothing had really changed within me. Ralph touched on, I didn't get that. I didn't discover truth about myself. I didn't find and face some facts about myself I didn't know. I didn't get a change or a shift in perception that my sponsor talks about, this being a disease of perception. All I really did was dump a few secrets, and nothing really changed. I was still the guy that was in conflict with life itself. I was still the guy prone to depression, and I'm a depressive alcoholic. I'm a fear-filled alcoholic. I'm the kind of alcoholic sober, I just wake up afraid. Now, I can't even tell you what I'm afraid of most of the time. But I just wake up with a feeling like there's some crap going to happen today. You know what I mean? And so I'm on high alert all the time. And it's a funny dynamic when you're expecting crap to happen. It shows up. It's like you're magnetized. It's like amazing. And my first several years was tough. And then I finally thought, I got to do something. I was sober about 3 years, and maybe I'll try another shot at these steps. you have an intuitive sense that you missed something here, and I went back. This time I answered the 30-some questions out of the book, The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, wrote about close to a page on each of the 7 deadly sins, and was as honest as capable of being. And nothing changed. And then when I was about 4 years sober, right before I was 4 years sober, I went to a Joe and Charlie weekend. And right after that, I had a guy I sponsor. And I stayed sober my first 4 years by sponsoring guys 2 meetings a week, 2 hospital and institution meetings. I was every commitment available in Alcoholics Anonymous, from DCM, 2 conference committees. I mean, I was trying to outrun my alcoholism. And I had this guy sponsor. He wanted to do a 4-step, and he said something. He'd been at that workshop, and he said, "Could we do it out of the book?" And I sat down with him, and I took him through the 4th step in the book. And the Hindus say something that is very right on for me, that the student doesn't learn the lesson until he becomes the teacher. I learned more about the 4th step, helping this idiot do a 4th step, than I could have ever learned about the 4th step trying to do a 4th step. When I looked at that book and looked at it for me, I couldn't see it like I could see it when I was looking at it for him. And one of the things that happened, this guy was very much like me, with a lot of resentments. There's a lot of wrong people in the world. I mean, and if you're like me, you notice. And we're covering that. We're talking about that whole page 66, where it just hammers this principle of this stuff's going to kill you. It's infinitely grave. It's poison. It's cutting you off from the sunlight of the Spirit. On and on and on. Hammers this fact you're going to die if you don't get free of this stuff. And then after it tells you that, and it says, "Oh, by the way, you can't wish it away any more than alcohol." It's like, and we get to that line, and when I read the line, "You can't wish it away any more than alcohol," this guy looks at me and he says, "What do I do?" And I don't know. Joe and Charlie didn't talk about this part. And I don't know. And I don't got nothing here. And I don't know what to say. And I looked down on the page in the book, and I swear to God, it was like it was in neon. It says, "This was our course." And I went, "Well, this was our course." And I, like I knew that. I didn't know that. I mean, I had no clue. I'm just there, sort of. And we started to read that next couple lines, and as I tried to explain it to him, I got it. I don't think he ever did, because he didn't really. In our book, it starts. Chuck, my grand sponsor, used to say that this was an inside job. It starts in step 1, and it talks about that. It says, when we fully concede to our innermost selves. Recovery from alcoholism is in here. It never will be, never was, and cannot be an academic process. It is not intellectual, it's experiential. And that's why it has to happen in here. And that's where these realizations must happen. I'm a member of a group in Las Vegas called Connect the Dots. And we named it because that's the deal. In myself, somehow, I have to connect dots that I've never connected before. I have to make some things real that up until this moment were never real for me before. And I came back right after that. I was in a lot of difficulty and a lot of fear and a lot of depression. I was getting to the point where I could not outrun the depression. It's not really depression. It's really self-pity. But I don't like that word. It's a squirmy word. Depression has a little more panache to it. I mean, and I've been diagnosed twice by competent psychiatrists as clinically depressed. And you can go to a bar with a clinical depression diagnosis and they'll buy you a drink. They don't buy you crap for self-pity. But what happens to me is that I get so obsessively focused on my life and all these things I'm afraid of. And I keep looking into my future and checking it and looking for problems. And I have never checked my future where it looked good. You know what I mean? I only see potential problems, and what happens is the fear eventually just overwhelms me, and the anxiety overwhelms me, and I just sort of implode. And I'll tell you something. Chamberlain used to say something. Boy, is it true. He said, if you're alcoholic and you're sober, eventually there'll come a time where you can no longer put anything between you and you. And there you are. And at a little over 4 years sober, going to 15 to 20 meetings a week, having every service commitment available, I ran at the end of my rope. And I was desperate. And I think I was at a turning point again, where I was either something was going to change, or I was probably not going to stay here. I was just worn out. I'll tell you some of the symptoms that led up to that. Well, one is I was so self-righteous. You know, I'd been very involved in general service, and I really studied the traditions. Not to make me a better member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I studied the traditions so I could go to meetings and look for tradition breaks, you know? Yeah, like when I found one, it was like Christmas, you know? And what had happened is my ego had grown back. It had been beaten up pretty bad coming off my last drunk, and to the point where I tried to commit suicide. And then it rose up out of the ashes. The problem is I'm getting ego dominant. I don't know it. Because it's the great shift changer. The greatest trick the ego ever has done in my life is convinced me it doesn't exist. See, now it's using the traditions. It's using I've developed a little AA resume that I can show you of all my service commitments. Right? I'm taking the things that are saving my life and keeping me sober and using them for self-grandizement. And I become the judgmental guy. I'm the guy who goes to meetings and just sits there and realizes how you really don't have it, do you? Sometimes I need to tell you. Sometimes I'm just too humble. It's a calling. I became so serious and so self-righteous. You know what the problem with self-righteousness is? Self. Right? I'm just so self-grandizing and it's prestige, being right, all that crap. And I was judging my way right out of Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything's very heavy to me, every serious. A guy at the top, we have a club, one of the oldest AA clubs in Las Vegas, the TIE Club on 11th Street. Guy, after a meeting down there, accused me of having my sense of humor surgically removed. I mean, because nothing's funny. Everything's a big deal with me. And I was getting ready to quit my fourth job. No, I'm sorry. I was getting ready to quit my 9th job in 4 years. That speaks volumes about untreated alcoholism. And everywhere I ever go to work looks like a good place. The people look really nice. And then I'm not there very long, and they're idiots, and they're stupid, and they're taking advantage of me, and they're, and I'm always the guy that's leaving. And I'm a little over 4 years sober, and I'm suffering from a malady of my being, what this book calls a spiritual malady. Some of you that come here maybe you've been beaten up or abused by religion as kids. This is not a religious thing. You know something inside yourself. You know what I'm talking about when I talk about having a sick spirit. It's the same thing that you felt when you were sober a period of time and you walked into a bar and it felt like you were depressed and disconnected from life itself. Your very being was sick. And in the old days, 4 shots of tequila would vitalize your spirit. And that was sick within me. And I didn't know what to do about it. Self can't move self out of the center. And so I started back through this process, and it's an interesting. I just want to read this one part, and when I read this in early sobriety, I thought they were talking about us when we're drinking. Do you know that 95% in my book of what they're talking about in here is about crap I deal with sober? And on page 73, it says, more than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. This is the part he read at the beginning of the meeting. I am very much the actor. To the outer world, I present my stage character. This is the one I like other people to see. I want to enjoy a certain reputation. I want a certain amount of prestige, a certain amount of notoriety. I want an image in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I know secretly in my heart that I don't deserve it. And the book says the inconsistency between who I really am and who I so desperately want you to think I am. The inconsistently is made worse by the things I do on my sprees. Anybody besides me ever have sober sprees? I've had self-will run riot. I've had judgment fests. I've had gossip fests. I've had sexual stuff. I've had money spending stuff. I've had self-will run riot binges sober. I love that line in step 10, and that there's a part in step 10, it talks about the emotional hangovers from yesterday's excesses, as we feed the dog of self, and the dog that can never be fed full. And there is a hangover after that. It's an awful thing, and this was me sober. I remember in the period of my first few years, I picked up a little gambling hobby. That's usually involved my whole paycheck the night I got it. And I remember I was so depressed and so full of self-loathing. I was almost to the point of having suicidal feelings, and driving up to the big meeting Saturday night, and I'd just blown my whole paycheck the night before, Friday night. And I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I don't want to go into the meeting. I want to hole up somewhere like a wounded animal. But I'd made a commitment to meet people in there, and you guys have brainwashed me into show up where you say you're going to show up. I think that was the first thing you ever laid on me and hammered me. Do what you say you're going to do, kid. And you hammered that into me. And so I made this commitment to show up there, and I'm sitting in the parking lot, and I feel awful. And it was like, did you ever see that movie, All That Jazz? Remember the scene where he's like ready to kill himself, and he looks in the mirror and puts this big smiley face and says, "Showtime!" Oh, it was just like that. It was almost as if I had to reach in the glove compartment and pull out my sober spiritual suit and zip it up, and then go into the meeting and just talk all these platitudes and all this wonderful stuff. And then I went home and I felt like I was dying. The inconsistency. Chamberlain used to say this is a disease of separation. He talked a lot about separation between me and God and separation between me and you. But I think there's a third type of separation, and that's I'm separate from me. I think by the time some of us get here, we've tried to be so many things to so many different people, we don't even know who we are anymore. We don't have, we've so just damaged our internal compass, our spiritual compass, that we're lost even from ourselves. And within every one of us is this thing that knows. I used to drink because I didn't like what it knew. But there's this thing inside of me, And I tried to so desperately, see, because my ego doesn't care about any of that. It only cares how it looks. My ego doesn't care if it kills me, as long as after I'm dead, everybody thinks how right I was, and what a wonderful guy I am. It's hideous. And so I've run over myself and disconnected myself from myself until I don't even know who I am. And I started to do this process in the book, and I started to discover who I was. You led me back to myself. You led me back into community, and you led me to God. And I didn't know you were doing that. I came out of that third, fifth step with a tremendous shift in consciousness. In my first two, fourth, and fifth steps, after I was done, in both of them, if you would have asked me about the wrongs, what was the exact nature of your wrongs, I think I would have told you about the guy I stabbed, the money I stole, some of the sex things I did, the lies I told. I would have told you all that. After I did the one in the book, you would ask me what was it? You know what I would have said? I would have said how wrong I was about my mother and father. How wrong I was about my sister. How wrong I was about those women that had rejected me. And how wrong I was about the bosses. Because as I did, this was our course, and I started to look at it through their eyes, it was like a tremendous awakening. All of a sudden, I could see me the way you saw me. And now I know why she rejected me. Oh my God, I'd have rejected me too. I mean, it was not a mystery. I didn't feel a victim anymore. It was like, my God, how'd she stay in there as long as she did? I knew why those bosses fired me. What I couldn't understand after this fourth and fifth step is how they gave me as many chances as they did. I started seeing very clearly that people had been much kinder and generous with me than I had ever was willing to be with anyone. Because I was seeing it through your eyes. And I never got that before. I love Ralph said it, I believe it, that I can't carry out the decision in step 3. I am blocked. I am blocked from a lot of things. I'm blocked from the God that the book says I will find deep down within me in the last analysis. I'm also blocked from myself, and I'm blocked from you. And I'm blocked from carrying out the decision in step 3. When he was talking about how we turn over, take it back. That was a lot of my early sobriety. I get down on my knees. I would, with amazing and sincere intention, say the third step prayer, get up off my knees, and 5 minutes later, I'm in my head having conversations with people that aren't in the room. All to the end where they will realize how right I was. I mean, it's like I'm up into the control center running the universe. And as the book says, we had to quit playing God. Well, because it didn't work. Well, that's like telling the day of the Super Bowl, one of the teams that are going to be in the Super Bowl, to quit playing football. I mean, they don't know anything else. They're not going to go out there and play baseball because they don't know how to play baseball. They've been geared up for football forever. And I was geared up to run the show and didn't know it. And I was in the bondage of self. And, I did something that a lot of us do. I jumped from step 5 to the 7th step prayer. And I missed what one of the guys I sponsor calls the Judas step. And it's the reason he calls it the Judas step, and I think this is right. If you're 20 years sober and something betrays you, it's probably step 6. It probably comes back to a step 6 situation. Somebody earlier, I think it was Mickey, talked about the 3 frogs. Well, if you ever totally became entirely ready, I think that's when you'd hear the splash. Right? That's where you hear the splash. When you look at depictions of surrender in the movies, what do you see? You see people who are in desperate, hopeless straits. There's no maneuvering room here. They're at the end. There's nowhere to go. And what has to happen? Well, the first thing they do is they discard every means of defending themselves. They lay down their guns and their knives and their hand grenades and their pistols until they are absolutely rendered defenseless. And then they hang out and wait for direction. See, you can't be surrendered and defended at the same time. It's a mutually exclusive position. So the problem is that most of my defects of character, I don't recognize them as defects of character. I think they're tools for living. All right? That I know that sometimes I go a little far with them. But I'm not convinced. And if you're not convinced there's not value in them, why would I become entirely ready to abandon them, to let God have them? Until I can see the truth. And it's a very similar dynamic to what happens with alcohol. There's a friend of mine says there's 3 phases of alcoholism. There's the fun phase, there's the fun and problems phase, and then there's the problems phase. And most of us get here in the problems phase, or maybe the problems and a little bit of fun we think, but not really phase. But nobody comes here in the fun phase. And why? Because we still, even if it's unconscious, I still see value in drinking. See, if you look at the last almost 3 years of my drinking, it was so pathetic. Because this alcoholic mind would punk me out time and time again as I would be up against the feelings of untreated alcoholism that would start to grind at me and drive me insane. And then my head would start painting a picture as if I can get high the way I got high when I was 18 years old. Now, the reality is that has been a dead horse for about 3 years. But my God, I don't want it to be a dead horse because it was really great when it was great. And so I will get this self-delusion, which is a psychotic, wishful thinking, that there is a party where the truth is there ain't no party. And you don't know that till you're about a little way into it, and you're beating yourself up saying, my God, why did I do this again? My God, why did I do this again? And I think the same thing happens to some of our defects of character. I'll just talk about something else later, but I think for a lot of becoming entirely ready was wearing things out. One of the differences between Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, in a lot of churches, in a lot of churches, if you're a sinner, they really want you to come into their church. But they kind of want you to stop sinning. I mean, it's implied in the brochure. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they might not come right out and say that, but they kind of imply that now that you're in the church, you should cut it out. Stop that. We don't do that in Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, we say sin as long as you can stand it. Oh, yeah. We sit in coffee and talk about what people are doing. We say things to each other. Oh, he'll help a lot of people if he lives through that. Well, isn't that true? I mean, look at your own life. Look at some of the stuff that you use to help the guys and gals you sponsor. It's not your successes. It's the stuff that lets them know that they're not alone and that there are other people who have been defective like they are, and that there was hope. That there are people in Alcoholics Anonymous that have, in God's time, been changed. And sometimes that's the best thing I have in my life. With the guys I sponsor is the things. Last weekend we had a weekend workshop, a retreat I do every year for the guys, all the guys that can make it that I sponsor. And we had some amazing, very genuine, transparent workshops. And I mean stuff that you won't hear in meetings. because we help each other with that. And I see, and I set it up because I kind of know what's going on behind the curtain with all these guys. So I'll put people on the panel that I know are going to help but they don't know that. And then they'll share something they didn't really want to share, but we don't tape it. And then all of a sudden, all these guys come forward. Oh my God, I'm in the middle of that. I'm in the middle of that. And then they start to network with each other. And they start to talk with each other. Some of them start to pray with each other. And they start to bring grace into the thing about all this stuff is you have to bring it out into the light of day. It has to come out into the light of day. Nothing changes in the dark. Nothing. All right, there's a guy at my old home group used to say, you can do anything you want, sober, absolutely anything, as long as you can stand up and talk about it in front of your home group. That eliminates a lot. To stay in the light, my self-centeredness squirms the most. It slithers the most in the dark when it's hidden. I never said the 6-step prayer. And I got to tell you, I don't know if I conveniently didn't see it or I really didn't see it. I don't know, but I didn't say it. And wasn't conscious that it was there for a while. Back in those days, we didn't have the big book consciousness that we have today in Alcoholics Anonymous. We went from a fellowship that really hardly even talked. We didn't even know anything about the big book. We've gone so far the other way. I mean, well, that's what we do. What's the Bill say? We're enthusiasts. That's a way of saying obsessive, I think. So what happened is I spent the next many years trying to conquer my defects of character with self-will. There's a principle in the universe that for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. And everything I willfully attacked seemed to gain power. There's a line it's talking about drinking, but I think it's the same with defects, where it's talking about shielding a man from temptation and how this is doomed to failure because what always happens is a bigger explosion than ever. And when I'm using self-will rather than God's grace to change me, it's like it gains angst and torque the more will I put on it. It's like, okay, I'm getting good. Now I'm real good. And now I'm very good. I'm so good I need to tell you how good I am. I am so good that it's a shame you'll never be as good as I am being good. And then I run out of power and it's like... And what happens, I have a bigger explosion than ever. And I did some things in the area of sex as a result of willfully trying to control that, and then I'd have an explosion. I'd end up doing something. I just think, oh my God. Why did I do that? Why did I do that? I did some things with money and honesty. And it's odd. Coming out of that 5th step, it became very clear to me that I was very judgmental. I mean, I had this resentment list. It was all these cases I'd built on people. And it was pathetic. I thought, oh my God. To know intellectually you're kind of judgmental and to see it through your whole life on paper is like, oh my God. And I remember thinking, okay, man, that's off. I'm not going to be judgmental anymore. And I instantaneously started noticing the judgmental people in AA. And I became judgmental of the judgmental, which makes me the same thing as them. You know what it's like? Did you ever go to one of those anybody have kids here? Take them to those arcades. There's a game in the arcade called Whack-A-Mole. Right? And it's all these moles and they pop up through these holes and you hit them with a hammer and the minute you hit one, it pops up somewhere else. And it changes forms. When I was a year and a half sober in a point where of almost suicidal despair, I hit this horrible bottom with gambling. And I had this massive surrender, and I went to a few gambling meetings, and I actually found something that was kind of amazing to me, that there was more recovery from gambling in Alcoholics Anonymous than there were in the gambling program. Just like there's more recovery from drug stuff in here than there is in the drug program. Because alcoholics, you got to be a real alcoholic to be here. But that doesn't mean you're pure in every other area. I mean, and so, I hit this, and I was free. I didn't place a bet in any form for almost 25 years. Never thought about it. I was out of the woods. I even kind of stopped praying about it. Just because I'm clear. I'm good now. Good to go. Wasn't a piece of business in my life anymore. And I retired, and I got a couple big 7-figure checks, and I realized I need to invest that. And stock market's not really gambling. Man, 7 months later, I'm on my computer trading stocks 7 hours, 7 hours a day. It was like I was in this roller coaster. I had days where, one day I've lost $500,000, and the next day I made 600. I was just like, and I was obsessed. It owned me. And I started to feel really horrible about myself. One of the guys I sponsor busted me. He called me up, and he's pouring his heart out. He had this terrible problem. And he says, "What's that noise?" And he could hear the keys on the computer. He says, "You're trading stocks, aren't you? You're not even listening to me." I said, No, I'm listening. What did I just say? I was busted. And that's the beauty of sponsoring people. There's an accountability in that. I used to say that I only would ever come to the table in step 6 by wearing stuff out until it was like a dead carcass. You sponsor a lot of guys, you'll start coming to the table in step 6 and really coming to God, because you won't want to be that example, right? And it's everything that we ever address in 6 and 7 is all things that stand in the way of my carrying out my primary number one purpose, and that's helping God's kids. And when I say in the 7-step prayer, I'm asking God to have all of me, and to remove every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness. Now, if you're sitting here new, you're probably thinking, useful? What about happy? What about rich and famous? I mean, can't you ask God for that? And it's not a self-serving program. I'm trying to become more useful. I've known usefulness, and I've known some happiness. I'm going to tell you a thing about happiness. The shine of it wears off pretty quickly. Usefulness will let you walk down the street knowing that you're not perfect, but knowing exactly who you are and feeling really good about it. And it'll let you put your head on the pillow at night and sleep because you are one with. When you're useful, there is no more double life, because you're doing and being exactly what you've been divinely crafted to be. And our primary purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous is divine. I have been crafted by God, by my pain, my misery, my failures, and my very defects, into being uniquely useful to another guy that's just like me. Now, I can't help everybody, but I'm pretty good with people that are sick like I'm sick. And some of you may not identify with me at all. That's okay. We got a wrench for every nut in Alcoholics Anonymous. There'll be another speaker, and you'll go, "Wow, that's me." Because we are crafted by God. What's the purpose? Is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Our max to grow, to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Alcoholics Anonymous is not in my book and in my experience, never was and never will be a self-help program. It's a program of self-abandonment and service for fun and for free. Matter of fact, I think service should cost you something. I know that we are self-supporting, but I don't. You think that us that come here, they pay the basic expenses over the period of a year. I mean, it costs us to come here. It just does. And I'm good with that. Matter of fact, every 3-4 times a year, I go places on my own dime. I used to do it a lot more, but in this economy, I can't do it as much as I used to. Because I owe Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I owe. I got saved here. There's no stretch of my imagination that could ever convince me I deserve anything here. I've seen smarter, more educated, better, kinder, more moral people than me die of this disease. I'm telling you. I don't know why I got lucky. I guess I got just enough of me beaten out of me that I could hear you. And I entrenched myself in the fellowship. Ralph was talking about the triangle. I try to sponsor people with all 3 legacies. And I don't, I go through different periods of my sobriety where I think one is more important than the other. I don't think that anymore. I think they're crucial, all 3 of them. I know some people that are so into recovery. They're just amazing big book step technicians, but their service is nothing. And their unity, they don't have any jobs in the fellowship. They don't have no commitments in alcohol. I think it's the whole deal. The whole deal here. I have to be active in my home group, and I have several jobs in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have 4 commitments a week. I don't have them to tell you that I have them. I have them because I need to be tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't be a visitor here. I can't be a taker. I can't be a guy who comes to Alcoholics Anonymous and gets entertained and leaves. I have to be a guy putting stuff in. This is a disease that is where everything's backwards. It's funny. I go through life with this huge vacancy inside of me. And it clamors at me. It clamors incessantly at me for more. Now, what more of what? I'm not sure, but I know it's more of something. And I'm going to find what that is. And I'm always targeting stuff, looking for what, is a BMW, a Mercedes, just on and on and on. And it never fills the gap. The hole is never filled. And isn't it weird? Some of us spend our lives trying to fix this inside vacancy with outside stuff, and then we, out of despair and hopelessness and a lack of alternatives, we throw ourselves, because we don't know what else to do, into trying to help other people, and an amazing thing happens. We start experiencing those moments where the vacancy fills up the way I imagined it would feel like if I had everything I needed to have. That the hole is filled not by getting, but by giving. That I always had it backwards. And I think that's a common thing in Alcoholics Anonymous. In the book it says it's the third delusion. The delusion that I can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if I only manage well. And the reason that's a delusion, objectively, I don't think there's a demographic on the planet that has ever spent more money, more time, more obsessive energy or focus on making themselves happy as we have. And what's the end result is, will you sponsor me? It's like, it's an absolute failure. Let's face it. If we could have rested happy, we would have made ourselves happy and satisfied. We'd have done it years ago. And it's not, who's tried harder? Who buys the self-help books? Who takes the meds? Who moves? Who changes jobs? Who does it all? We do. Because of the grandfather obsession of all, isn't it? That I'm primarily obsessed with myself. Isn't that the truth underneath it all? I'm primarily obsessed with myself and my feelings and my security and my comfort and my well-being and me. And you guys have had your way with me. And God has His way with me. And I finally, at a number of years sober, I said that the 6-step prayer that I'd missed, where I asked God to be willing, help me to be willing. And what happened is things started changing in my life. It's funny, I've looked back over the years from the moment I said that prayer, all of a sudden I started feeling uncomfortable in situations that I used to feel comfortable in. Things started changing in here. All of a sudden, some of my behavior that I justified and rationalized, all of a sudden it didn't hold water anymore. And I started getting to those moments where I would go and do something I've done 20 times, only this time I do it and I feel terrible about myself. And God was having His way with me. I was becoming entirely ready. And some things I started to see, it was like the veil lifted and I saw the truth. I started seeing there's no value in this. But I had to see the truth. And, all these defective defense mechanisms, like anger, for example. What is anger except my number one defense against a world that threatens me a lot? My God, what if God really did remove that? Then who's going to stand up for me the next time I'm attacked? The next time somebody's trying to take advantage of me? The next time the cable company's ripping me off, or imagined or real, or I think the bank is screwed with my account. Who's going to stand up for me? Who's going to take care of me? Maybe God would have to. Maybe God would have to. Oh my God, that means that this is not talk anymore. You mean if God takes away this stuff, I'm really and truly going to be left with no alternative except to rest in His hands, to trust Him. Ooh, I don't know. What's lust? Isn't it really a defense mechanism against a life that I'm afraid is going to be boring and lonely and uneventful? What's greed except this secret fear that I'm never going to get my share, or I'm never going to have enough, that I'm never going to be okay, and on and on and on. And yet, over the course of time in sobriety, as a result of acting out on some of these defects of character and using them, in times when I'm afraid, it makes it worse. It makes it worse. There was a TV show on when I was a kid. Some of you might remember it, called Rescue 8. And it was about these paramedics that worked out of a fire station, and they would go out to help people that were in distress. And this one particular episode, and I have no idea why I remembered this one and none others, but I remembered this one. They go out to the scene, and there's this cute little girl, and her arm is wedged into a vending machine, and they can't get it out. Every time they try to pull it out, she just cries hysterically. It really hurts her when they try to pull on it. And her parents are there, and they're very hysterical and upset. Please help my daughter. Get my daughter's arm out of there. And she's stuck, and this is horrible. And, well, the firemen start pulling up. Now they're pulling saws and torches off the truck. They're talking about cutting the door off, and it's just scaring the little girl more. And the one paramedic's just kind of watching all this. And he kneels down next to her and he says, "Sweetheart, what do you got in your hand?" She says, "Candy bar." He says, "Would you let go?" "No, it's my candy bar. It's my candy bar. It's my candy bar." "Well, we can't get you out." "No, it's my candy." She ain't budging, man. She's locked and loaded, I'm telling you. And he backs away. He doesn't know what to do. After a couple minutes, he comes back down to her and he says, "Sweetheart, I will make you a promise. If you will let go of that candy bar, I will get you 2 candy bars." And she looks at him and she says, "Really?" And he says, "I promise you, really." And because She trusts. She lets go of the candy bar and her arm slides out of the vending machine. What's your candy bar? We don't hold on to old self-indulgent, self-centered, fear-driven behavior for no reason. There's a candy bar. There's an illusion of value. And once I see the truth, which is really 90% of all awakenings, is I just pull my head out of my butt and get it. Once I see the truth, it's a lot easier to become entirely ready to have God remove something that, I get it now, God, I get it. I get it. Please, take this. Take it. It just this thing I think is making me less lonely makes me more lonely. The thing I think that's going to protect me endangers me. The things in me that I think are going to help do not help. They make things worse. I heard a guy years ago, he said, I've never had a problem in my life that's hurt me as much as my solutions to my problems. Isn't that the truth? Without God's grace, I become a hostage. Those of us that have tried to willfully conquer our defects of character, we become the reformed whatever. And there's no freedom in that. Confucius once said that the chains that bind us most closely are the ones we have broken. And we all get that. If you've never been this guy, you know people that are the reformed smoker who are just so intolerant and angry at other people that are smoking. They're as hostage to the cigarettes as when they smoked them. Or the reformed lust guy who's just going around being heavily intolerant and judgmental of everybody's behavior. He's just as much a hostage as he was when he was in the middle of it. Or the alcoholic who's going around telling his other family members how they shouldn't drink and accusing them of having alcoholism. He's just as much a hostage to it. See, that's not freedom. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're talking about freedom. An amazing freedom. That if I can just do the inside job here, and it really is an inside job to become entirely ready. It's not an intellectual process. It's in here. And sometimes it's a painful journey. And sometimes it's magnificent. I have had the experience, I got back into the stock market and then I just got so sick of it again that I asked God to remove it, and I just made it a piece of spiritual business in my life, and I got up every morning and I'd get on, I'd be trading stocks as I'm asking God to take this from me. Almost 6 months later, it was just gone. I got up one morning and I just sold everything. And then my first sponsor got me back into it after about 3 years of abstinence, and I just got free of it again. Why did I get back into it? Because it stopped being a piece of spiritual business. Why have I been sober without any alcohol or any chemicals for 33 years? Because every single day of my life, my alcoholism is a piece of spiritual business in my life. Every single day. If I could do that with my defects of character, I believe I would have the success that I've had in those areas. I believe that. But unfortunately, I've never suffered as much from my other stuff as I've suffered from drinking. Alcohol just about killed me. Matter of fact, when I last drunk in 1978, I stood on a bridge sobbing, trying to get up enough courage to just make it stop. I've been relapsing for over 6 years. I was at that horrible place where drinking was terrible and sobriety was terrible. And I was awful in both. And suicide started looking like a good deal. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we get close to that, but it's really hard to do that with a defective character, to get to that extremes. And yet I've had friends that have. I've watched people in Alcoholics Anonymous at 20 some years sober go to prison for 20 years. Or all kinds of things in AA. And it's all because of a lack of surrender. If you're new here, I got good news for you, is that you don't have to get perfect here. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. But we must have some progress here. And slowly but surely, guys change. And you don't know you change. You don't know what God's doing to you. And then all of a sudden, you're in a situation and you realize that it's different. You know what? AA works it's very much like that marijuana they had back in the early 70s called creeper pot. Remember creeper pot? You'd buy a bag of that creeper pot, you'd smoke it, you'd take it home, smoke it. You'd think, I got ripped off. You were on your way back to the guy who bought it from, and you were going to beat him up when all of a sudden you had to sit on the curb and watch the colors. I mean, where it just like it would, woo! Like, how'd that happen? When did that, how did that happen? And all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation. Maybe you're going through a divorce and you've been through a divorce before. And now you're walking through it as a gentleman with some integrity, and you weren't that way the last time. And you realize something has happened to me. Something is different. And I didn't do it. It is but for the grace of God. Thank you.